part of Early Childhood Podcast here in New Mexico. This is our first interview, walking beside two of our leaders in early childhood public education arena. Hi, my name is Katrina Gallegos, and I'm an early childhood instructional coach. And my co-host is Dawn Berry.
Hi, I'm excited to be here today talking with Katrina and Brenda, Kofahl and Terri, Tapia. We're going to be discussing the changes that Brenda and Terri have seen in early childhood education in New Mexico, as well as their hopes for New Mexico's youngest citizens. Who knows what you might be moved to do because of their words.
Hi, I'm Brenda Kofahl. I'm currently retiring from the Public Education Department and the Early Childhood Education and Care Department in New Mexico. For the Public Education Department, I was Director of Early Childhood Education. I've been an elementary principal, a curriculum coordinator, a Head Start director, and a teacher of multiple grades. So I'm really old and have been around a long time. And I'm just excited to see where early childhood is and where we're going in New Mexico.
Thank you, Brenda. We're excited that you're here with us today. Terri?
Well, good morning. It's still morning here in Santa Fe. I'm Terri Tapia. I work with the Central Region Educational Cooperative, and I have the privilege of supporting our early childhood instructional coaches across the state of New Mexico as a lead coordinator. I have been in early childhood education going on close to 20 years now, which I can't believe, but it was a second career for me, and I have had the opportunity to work in community-based programs as a child care director or program director. I've also worked with the Head Start programs. I worked on a tribal site as a director of a tribal Head Start. And then also at the state level, and of course now in this position.
Thank you so much, Terri. Well, I know, Dawn, me and you, when we first sat down, we're like, let's try to figure out how we're going to do our podcast. We knew exactly when we were sitting there who we wanted to bring in for our very first podcast. And you said,
yeah, we needed Brenda and Terri so we could learn about New Mexico and what early childhood has looked like in the past and current, and then our hopes for the future. And so we're really thinking who better to help us to know where we came from and where we're going. And we just really thought, Brenda and Terri could really share that with us. So we're so happy to have you both here with us this morning.
So just our first question that we have for you guys. So Brenda and Terri, tell us a little bit about how you guys got to know each other professionally.
Goodness.
Go ahead, Brenda, you start, and then I'll try to fill in some of the gaps as I recall them.
Yeah.
Terri and I have known each other for so long that I was trying to think when I first read this question, when did I first meet Terri? We were both tribal Head Start directors. I'm not sure that happened at the same time. So I was thinking, did I see her at one of those National Indian Head Start Association meetings or something like that? But I distinctly remember a couple of things when she was with the Children, Youth, and Families Department. Terri and I were both interviewing for a job, and we didn't know each other very well. I'm sure I knew who she was, didn't know her. And someone was then being interviewed, and I was sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting because it was late. And then Terri came in and sat down. So by this time, they're 2 interviews behind. And we're both sitting there trying to be really professional, but the noises coming out of the office didn't sound very, there was lots of laughter and comments and things, and we're trying not to hear. So I remember that. very distinctly. And then working on projects like the revision of the child care quality rating and improvement system. Terri was working on that. We were, as public ed, I was at the public ed department. We were looking at that, and we had this idea that public ed should have a quality rating and improvement system. And at that time, that was a pretty revolutionary idea. QRIS or TQRIS was strictly on the childcare side. So I got to know Terri as she was working on that project and, you know, in her role at CYFD. And then as things moved forward, we worked very closely on the Race to the Top projects. And Terri, I think you may remember there may have been a federal grant before Race to the Top, but we've worked on some federal grant projects from the opposite side. And I just had a lot of respect for Terri and her knowledge and her integrity and the way that she was able to say something that was challenging what others in the room might think very gracefully, and appreciated her. And then came the day when we decided to work with the University of New Mexico Center for Development and Disability. Under the federal grant, we wanted to be sure that we were keeping our work with special education preschool, which was being funded by the grant, and our work with New Mexico pre-K, which was not at the time, separate. So we moved to a training, professional learning consultation model with UNM CDD. And one morning, I was talking with Sophie Bertram, the director there, and she said, "You are going to be so excited. I have found our manager for our consultants and training." And she said, "But I can't tell you who it is yet." And a few hours later, she called back and said that it was Terri Tapia. And I was just really pleased. And since then, we have we've worked so closely together. I was trying to explain to the Deputy Secretary of ECECD about our relationship between the PED staff and the staff there at CREC5. And I said, basically, due to the first the hiring freeze and then the inception of the Early Childhood Education and Care Department, I haven't had staff other than a 619 coordinator who's amazing for 2 years. I said the CREC5 became staff. They worked with us. We didn't view them as contractors. We viewed them as us. And I said, I think is a really special, important relationship. Terri has always been the utmost professional and has really built a system of professional learning and coaching at CREC5 that we're starting to see modeled in other areas. People are calling and saying, "How do we do this? How?" And people are shocked at, "Oh my gosh, you're filming teachers twice a month and they're letting you and they like it." But just, it's been a great ride. Terri and I will continue to stay in touch, I'm sure. She's definitely a true friend. So Terri, fill in all the stuff I left out because we go way back.
Well, thank you, Brenda. I was trying to think about this as well. I think the very first time I came in contact with you was when I was the director of the Tribal Head Start. And our education director at that time encouraged us to go visit a high quality tribal Head Start. And where she allowed us to have a field trip was to Laguna. And we had the opportunity to go to Laguna, and you were the principal director of that program. And we had the opportunity to really see what a high quality tribal Head Start would look like. And I remember that we met very briefly. I think, in the cafeteria, and you were busy handling other responsibilities, but I do remember you from that. And that probably was, I was thinking maybe 17 years ago, possibly 17, 18 years ago. Then I think we crossed paths. I believe there was one year when the NAEYC had their national conference in Albuquerque. And I was a director at that time also. And I was interested in looking for an authentic observation assessment tool for the program that I was the director of. And I went to a workshop with Gay Grunland and Bev Engel, and they were introducing their project. And if I'm not mistaken, you may have been in that workshop also. And at the state level, you also were looking for a tool to use for authentic observation and assessment. And so, our paths were intertwined during that time. And then, of course, when you mentioned CYFD, we got to know each other much better. And so I think it's interesting that, as you said, you and I were interviewing for the same position at one point and looking at each other across that small little waiting room, wondering, this is pretty interesting, isn't it?
Was, and by the way, neither one of us got the job. The person that was in there for hours, she got the job. And I think, looking back, I am so thankful that I was not the one selected. I've said multiple times over the last year, I am a public school person. I did not realize how much I'm a public school person.
Right.
And but I truly am.
No, I think we both have been very grateful over the years, because we've had to do, we actually, our paths then have allowed us to do so many wonderful things and fun things and exciting opportunities that we've engaged in. One of the things I think has been a milestone for me is our opportunity to coordinate and facilitate the large institutes that we've had over the years with Race to the Top funding. The opportunity to coordinate and facilitate, an institute for 500 people, that they still talk about this opportunity where we were able to bring in teachers to a wonderful venue that elevated their self-worth, that they were being included in something like this. I think that was a highlight of our work together. And so as Brenda was speaking, I was thinking, I think the reason we work so well together is because we had this high level of profession, that we wanted all to be professionals, and our same view on, our values aligned so well that when Brenda promoted high quality education for young children, I could get right behind it. There wasn't a problem with it. I didn't have any lapse in, our level of ethics and so forth. So that's just a little bit, but we've had a long ride together, is what I want to say.
We have. And Terri, speaking of the institutes, I got some text yesterday from folks as I'm packing up my office. And one of them was, remember the institutes and how much fun we had at those institutes. And they said, and how much we learned. If, when COVID is over, can you please encourage ECCD and CREC5 to do another Inclusion Institute? That institute was a huge event, but it also, I think, was a turning point for our state in regards to including young children with delays and disabilities in general ed preschool classrooms.
Definitely.
Wow, that is just amazing, just sitting here and just listening to how you guys intertwine together. And, you know, one thing I can think of right now that's really standing out, that interview that you guys both were at, that's really actually what you guys were there for, to meet each other instead.
Yes,
So
I'm thinking, what a blessing in disguise, right?
Yes. So it was funny, but yet it was like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be hearing this. I am oversharing, you know, way too much information, but it was fun. Good times.
So now as we kind of go into our next question, I'm going to have Terri start this one off, and then we'll go to Brenda. But what led you both to the field of early childhood education?
That's an interesting question. My initial career was in insurance. I spent 20 years as an insurance agent, and I thought that's what I would probably spend my life doing. And I was at a crossroads. I'd already been doing that for about 20 years. And then my nephew was born. And I was just fascinated with this little child and his development. And so because I was at a crossroads in my career, I thought, well, what could I do? What could I do different if I'm not going to stay in this business? And I thought about early childhood. What would that look like? So I remember going to Santa Fe Community College and doing some career counseling, and what would I be best suited for? Early childhood was not the field that I'd be best suited for, unfortunately. When I did the Myers-Briggs test and all of those, and then I met with a counselor, what he said, well, actually, what you're really suited for is more what you have been doing, that type of business, or maybe accounting. And I thought, but I don't want to be an accountant. I want to work in early childhood. So I started taking some courses. I actually started to, and I thought, well, I'll go for my CDA. That was the easiest thing. And I thought I'll do that. And I remember sitting in this classroom with all these other young women. And my personality profile was so different from all of them. And I thought, but this is really what I want to do. So I pursued it, and I went in and I got my AA degree. And then when I did my student teaching, I had this aha moment, and I thought, I was in my mid-30s, and I thought, I just don't have the energy to be a teacher with young children. What am I going to do now? So I really looked at administration. I thought, well, I could do the administration part of early childhood education. And I have to say that during that time period, I had some of the best mentors possible. Brenda will recognize Phyllis Nye was one of my teachers. She was one of my mentors, and I just loved this lady. And she was at the end of her career. She had already retired from public education and at the state level, and was teaching as an adjunct faculty at Santa Fe Community College. But she really took me under her wing. And when I was ready, she said, when you're ready and you want to take on an administrator job, just let me know. Well, I ran into her at a concert, and she said, are you ready? And I said, I think I am, yes. And she said, okay, well, I'll meet you Monday. And she gave me my first director's position. And she mentored me during that time period. And then I continued to pursue and went for my bachelor's degree. And then, of course, went on to get a master's degree. But all along, I've just have had some really good individuals in my life who have shown me the benefits of being part of this early childhood field in New Mexico. And so I haven't regretted that change at all.
Wow.
Good. That's great to hear.
That's really amazing too,
Great
Terri.
story.
Just knowing where you started, and then now look where you're at too, and what you're impacting right now in New Mexico. So I just think that that's so amazing. So anyone that's listening and you're out there and you're ready for a new career, hey, early childhood.
That's right.
We're looking for educators. So come on down.
Thank you.
So Brenda, so what led you to the field of early childhood?
Actually, I got a degree in elementary education, thinking that my husband, I got married really young, We've been married almost 49 years and, dated in high school, the whole bit. We've known each other since we were little kids.
Wow.
And he's a musician, now a pastor, but at the time he was doing music. And I thought, if I have a degree in elementary ed, I could teach our kids if I decide that I can travel with them.
Yeah.
And then there was one other interesting thing that had happened. I had looked at medicine early on, and I had applied to Northwestern and didn't hear a thing. When my dad passed away, I found the acceptance letter from Northwestern. My dad loved his kids. He wanted to keep us close. And we were living in downstate Illinois at the time near St. Louis, and he did not want me going away to school. He was very protective. And so my sister and I found that letter, and I thought, you know what? Life has been great. I don't think I would have been that great a pediatrician. I think education is where I need to be. So when I took courses at Southern Illinois University and did practicums and student teaching, it was elementary ed because at the time there wasn't an early childhood ed, but I did my student teaching in first grade, loved first grade at Lincoln Elementary in Collinsville, Illinois.
Oh, wow.
And then took some classes around child development. And was really fascinated with young children and language development. As a senior, we had our first child, and so that just kind of spurred my interest in child development and facilitating language for this little kid that was very precocious in speaking in sentences very early. And, and then I taught in the Riverview Gardens District in Kansas City, or in St. Louis. And after a couple of years, there was a downturn in the economy. There was a glut of teachers, which is kind of hard to imagine right now. And we were having a second child, and I decided that I would stop for a while and do something else. And fast forward to the second child going into, he was in kindergarten, and my husband got an opportunity to move to Kansas City. And as we moved out there, I thought I wanted to be in 4th or 5th grade because I love writing. I loved the writing process with kids. And I thought I want to be in 4th or 5th grade. But Missouri had just changed their licensure to not K-8, but 1-8.
Oh.
And those of us who had, and they had instituted an early childhood license, but if you had a K-8 license, you were in pretty big demand for kindergarten. And Kansas City, Missouri was in the throes of desegregation, lawsuit, and settlement. And they needed kindergarten teachers to move. They needed twice as many. So I was placed in kindergarten, and I fell in love. And I adored kindergarten. So I worked in kindergarten. I stayed in the same school for 11 school years. Wow. 9 of those were kindergarten. 2 of them were times when I looped, sort of looping, but the kids I had in kindergarten came back to me, and they asked me to teach them in 2nd grade. So they'd been together in 1st grade with another teacher. I got them back, and I loved that. And that's an early childhood concept of continuity of care. And so I got to see that. And then when we moved to Albuquerque, again, another job opportunity for my husband, I thought, what do I want to do? And the local school district lost my application 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, do I really want to go there? Is God telling me this is not the place for you because, And I saw this little ad in the paper from the Pueblo of Laguna looking for an education coordinator for their Head Start program. When I was in college, I subbed in the Head Start program, and thought, what a great program. So I went to Laguna. I was education coordinator for just a few months. The director left and I became the director of their Head Start program, and just really fell in love with early childhood. A few years later, we were busy connecting the Head Start program with the elementary. And then the tribe took on the elementary school as a grant school. And I moved over as curriculum and instruction from birth to 3rd grade. And the wonderful Ruth Kai, who's from the Pueblo, took over as the Head Start director. We worked very closely, and we started this concept of bringing the educational assistant or the teacher from the Head Start to the kindergarten as the educational assistant, because that person knew the community, knew the families, and it was a way of looping staff. And it was just extremely successful. And so I stayed at the elementary school for a few years, and then moved to the public education department to work in pre-K. When I was working for the tribe, I was interested in pre-K, but that was the first year of pre-K, and I tried to apply, and we weren't eligible to apply at that time. And I was looking at the Head Start dollars and the pre-K dollars, and I thought, Head Start allows me to run a much more robust program. But during those years at Laguna, I met Ann Zuni, who was the former program manager at PED. And at the time, she was working in the Indian Education Division, and we had a tribal language grant. And so when Ann moved from Indian education over to pre-K, we talked, and she had a position open, and I wound up applying for that position and coming to PED, and found that, over the years, I love 3 and 4 year olds. It's probably my favorite. I love 2-year-olds too, but I like little people. But love my elementary and high school and college age grandkids, but just really enjoyed that age group. And so that's kind of how I got going. But
that's pretty amazing too, just hearing how you guys got both drawn to early childhood education. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, it is nice to hear what brought you into early childhood. So as you think about and reflect, kind of, you're reflecting about what brought you into early childhood. We would like you both to kind of describe those changes you've seen that have occurred in early childhood programs over the years. So I'll let whoever wants to go first. And the vast differences that I think, seeing Head Start and public ed and childcare, just, you know, all of the different types of programs in early childhood, just some of the changes, I guess, that you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my perspective, I think about the recognition of the importance of early childhood, how that has been raised over the years. And because of that, then there's been more funding assigned to early childhood. I think one of the biggest projects that I've had the opportunity to work on has been when New Mexico was awarded that federal Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant. You know, when we first applied, we didn't receive the grant. And I can just remember all of us sitting in that room, and Brenda, you remember that. We were so disappointed. We'd worked so hard on this application and put in all of these endeavors and these projects that we were going to move forward. And then shortly after, we were awarded the grant, but not the full amount, right? They said, well, you were next in line, but we don't have as much money to give you. And so we were scrambling to see how we were going to reduce some of the projects that we had in mind, what we could do. And then they not only fully awarded the grant amount, but then even a little bit later added some more money to it. So it helped us to really look at what could we do in New Mexico to beef up early childhood education. And as Brenda mentioned earlier, having this quality rating and improvement system for public school preschool classrooms. And that's not to say that there weren't quality measures. There were already the pre-K program standards that were being implemented. However, we now were looking at opportunities to expand this to those 619 IDEA funded classrooms and also Title I funded classrooms. And now we have Head Start classrooms that are where the district is the grantee. So we looked at how can we align this level of high quality across all those classrooms so that children in whichever classroom they were in would have the opportunity to have high quality. It didn't matter where the funding was coming from anymore. It's just an opportunity for children to experience high quality preschool. So when I think about that change, it has been something to celebrate, that we can see that happening, and it's taken time for it to happen. I always think about the analogy of tilling the soil, right? How we've been tilling the soil. Something doesn't grow right away when you do that if you're a farmer, but you till the soil, you take out the rocks, you know, when you put in nutrients and all those things that are needed, you prepare the soil, and then you do the planting, and then you start to see the fruitage. Well, I think that's what we've been doing. We've been tilling the soil, we've been preparing it. And I think when we look at what's happening now, I think this is the opportunity to see it start growing.
Right.
And that's just so powerful, I think, too, of just hearing that already, that high quality, you know, that you weren't watering things down. You guys really were coming together to figure out how can we really support early childhood and having high quality and valuing that, you know, for children here in New Mexico and their families and communities still, like having that. And so coming together as a team. And man, I wish I could have been like a little fly on the wall in that room, just listening to all the brainstorming that you guys were doing and all that hard work. But, you know, it's definitely growing, you know, our little plant is growing.
and I think too about what an innovative approach to have a quality rating system for public preschool, just because people are, I think parents would think, oh, it's public preschool, that it's high quality anyway, but a way for parents to make an educated decision about where they wanted their child to go and what would be the best fit for their child and for their family. I just, listening to you guys talk, I'm just thinking the word that's really sticking out to me is innovation, innovation, innovation.
Yeah. And remember those first talks, Brenda, when we started bringing together our stakeholders? One of the first conversations we had, I think, with around what this might look like was with Suzanne Harper, who had retired from Shining Stars as their director. And she she had a long history of what inclusive practices for young children should look like. And I remember sitting in that small little conference room and we're having those conversations. And Brenda, although she was the pre-K director, was looking at, but yes, we want to beef up inclusive practices in our pre-K classrooms because there had been some barriers to that. And maybe Brenda, you want to speak to what those barriers were and how you were looking at a QRIS to remove those barriers.
I think those barriers, overcoming those barriers, are one of the things that I am most pleased about with what what we've been able to accomplish at the state with the help of the special education division at the public education department. At the time, it was pretty much assumed nationally that if a child had an IEP or an individual education plan had been identified as needing special education services, they should be in a special education preschool, period. And I remember getting a call from a mom who had a little boy who was best friends with his next door neighbor, little girl. They were born within hours of each other. Mom and dads were friends. These little ones had played together their entire life. The little boy had an IEP. They're now 4. The little girl did not. The little girl's mom put her in the car every morning and drove her to the neighborhood elementary school for New Mexico pre-K. The little boy got on a little bus and was taken across town to a preschool program for children with delays and disabilities. And he would cry because he missed his friend. And she cried because she missed her friend. And it just broke my heart. And we're in the midst of trying to make our programs inclusive. When I was an elementary principal, our children were disproportionately identified as having special education needs, and they were served in exclusive environments. They were segregated. And we came in and through the help of some really innovative Native educators in Laguna, Gilbert Sanchez for one, we were able to exit more than 9% of our population, not 9% of the kids with IEPs, 9% of our populations from special ed services in 1 year, and to become a fully inclusive elementary school. And so I'd seen it done. I knew it was the right thing to do. Our Head Start was fully inclusive. And so it was like, why are we segregating these kids? There was this feeling that you couldn't serve them in a New Mexico pre-K classroom because the school district's getting funds to serve them, as a special education student. Well, that's for their special ed needs, not their general ed needs. So through a few legislative committee hearings, I remember one meeting at that big granite table at the Roundhouse, being terribly intimidated by the folks that were there, but having to speak up about what was right for kids. And fast forward, the objections were dropped.
Wow.
Legally, but even more than legally, morally and ethically, these children have a right to services in the least restrictive environment.
Mhm.
And they need to be in a place where they have a high quality teacher, highly qualified, where they have additional supports paid for through special education funding, maybe even additional personnel in the classroom, but with their peers, so that they're not the kid who is being taken across town instead of being with their neighbors and those kids that they'll go to elementary school with. Why would we start stigmatizing kids, even on their third birthday when they qualify? Why would we hang a label on them and exclude them? It's not right. And that child needs to be in a place where they can function, receive the best quality education, where they can make the best progress. We have programs. Terri mentioned Shining Stars. We have programs. Shining Stars is just one of them. Bernalillo Public Schools, Portales Public Schools, Deming, Gadsden, fully inclusive. Las Cruces, everybody is inclusive now. And many of those schools are seeing these little ones with IEPs make 2 years gain in 1 year.
Wow.
As educators, we know that if a child that's behind grows 1 year every school year, that child's never going to catch up.
Yes.
But if we can change that trajectory, if we can offer a high quality program, if we can pay attention to data, to that child's progress, if we can identify how that child learns, what their needs are, we can move them along with their peers. And kids learn from kids. It always amazed me when I was in Head Start and I would hear that the local district was going to take our kids with language delays and they were going to, for the morning, they were going to put them in a classroom with just other kids who didn't talk. And wondering, how are they going to pick this up? Kids learn from kids. And sometimes that 4-year-old sitting at the table is absolutely the best teacher for that, for that other 4-year-old who's struggling a little bit. They speak the same language. But I think that is the biggest change we've seen. The second biggest change is our approach to professional learning. It's totally changed. We're not doing what they used to call spray and pray. Throw it out there over everybody and pray that it, took hold. We're not doing one and done where you go for an intensive professional learning session and then they give you a book and you rush back into your classroom the next day and you never have time to look at that again. The model that we've used with public school preschool, and Terri is very much responsible for this, is an integrated approach. All of our professional learning is linked to our practice-based coaching. And it's linked not only to practice-based coaching, but to bridge to practice sessions so that educators have a chance to come together to talk about what they've learned, to talk about how they're applying it, how it's working, how it's not working, and to talk with each other, and then to be coached on those strategies. And I think the integration of that is what is helping to really move the quality of preschool I'm excited that the Early Childhood Education and Care Department is looking at our model and is looking at practice-based coaching for preschool programs and community-based, because I think this practice-based coaching model is key to helping educators to apply what they know, what they've learned in a safe setting, receive feedback, get to reflect. Teachers don't have time to reflect.
Right.
And to get to reflect. So I think that's really important.
Yes.
And if I could just add a little bit, Brenda, when you were talking about those early days, if I could, I remember how we were concerned when we put that first version of the Focus Essential Elements Equality out, and we had a pilot group that we were working with, because it was very bold, especially that section of our criteria when we talked about the full participation of each and every child, right? We talked about it because that was an initiative that in New Mexico had pushed forward, but what did it really look like, especially in our public school preschool settings? And I remember looking at that section and we'd massage it and we'd say, no, that's not good enough. We need to put stronger language in there about what this would mean. And then working with some school districts, and it was scary because this was changing what had been allowed to happen over time with young children with IEPs. It was just kind of a natural that they end up in that special education preschool classroom, which wasn't necessarily the best setting for that child. But when we started with New Mexico Pre-K and doing the inclusion with those children, those that it was appropriate for, and then those pilot districts saying, you know what we're doing, we're exiting out many of these young children. They're not going to need special ed services when they get to kindergarten. What a celebration that was. That was like, oh my, this is working. Okay, let's expand it. Let's go back and look at the criteria again. What else do we need to do with it? How do we make it even stronger to where it's been the best thing for young children? It truly has been, and that's been so rewarding. So I remember those early scary days.
They were scary.
That's just so amazing, just you guys talking about that, and those two examples of the changes that really have impacted children. And I even think as a teacher, I was kind of living that. You guys were on the other side of it. I was in the classroom and seeing that change happen, and I just feel like how important it is for these children. But you guys were doing what was best for children, not what was best for funding or anything like that. It was really for the connection of that child, what they deserve. You know, you only have them for that 1 year, right? In preschool, or you know, maybe you get 2 years, right? Maybe even 3, depending on what their birthday is. But really, that change that you really supported these children. I mean, that is just so important. But I mean, you had to have those tough conversations, but then also teach people what is high quality and what can we do, and what is a least restrictive environment. What does that look like? And so, I mean, it's very empowering on where we're at now and seeing these programs be so successful, but really having all the support and the training. But then with that practice-based coaching right there, I mean, teachers are seeing change. But like you said, they have that time now for that self-reflection. It's very that moment for them to really have self-reflection with their coach and engaging in practice-based coaching and being able to like record a video of themselves and, you know, having that moment of taking that time for themselves. They get to be stingy, you know, and I think that's so amazing. We're giving teachers that opportunity. You know, you matter, you're valued, you know, this is time for you to grow as a professional, and you know, you get to be stingy. So I love to say that because that's really what's happening for them. And, you know, we're valuing teachers, we're valuing, you know, children, and that's that high quality, you know, we're putting, you know, things in place to be able to help teachers and districts and have a true high quality experience.
and as I'm sitting here and I was listening to Brenda and Terri talk, I just was reminded of a meeting that we were all in the other day to celebrate Brenda, and how someone said, you were just saved for a time such as this. And I am sitting here listening to you guys think, and I'm recalling, Sally saying that and thinking, no, it is true. I think, you were here for a reason. You came to New Mexico for a reason. They lost your application 3 times for a reason, because you had better things to do. You had grander and more important things to do for the children of this state, for New Mexico. And just I'm hearing that, and we're seeing it. I mean, I've been in New Mexico now, I think this is my 9th year, but just seeing things happen over that short amount of time. I know there's been a lot of changes, and you are here. You were drawn to New Mexico for a reason. Terri, you were supposed to change your career for a reason, even though the test said it wasn't early childhood, it was accounting, and who would want to do accounting? Not me. But it was for a reason, both of you. And so you were where we needed you, where this state and where these children and families needed you to be those advocates, and to have those innovative changes and push against the tide, to get us where we need to be going and need to be. So anyway, that just listening to you guys talk, that just kept coming to me over and over. But,
yes, and I can just feel that emotion too, but it's the heart, your heart is speaking to you, and just we can feel that just with what you guys have done. And we might not have been in those meetings, but just now we're seeing that wave, and we're riding it, and we're seeing these great things, and we're supporting, and it's really amazing.
I think I always talk about this in both Katrina and Dawn, this in our meetings at times. I always talk about synchronicity, and it just seems like things happen, at the right time. And I remember when we were looking at, practice-based coaching was not a new model, but there was just the right time when it came into our lives as a system, right? And it was like the light bulb went off, and we thought, this really is the model we need to use for the work that we were doing. And yet it was very uncomfortable that first year. There were several individuals that said, I don't want to do this. This is not the way I want to be supporting teachers. And for some, they made the decision that it wasn't a good fit. And so it was a very uncomfortable, unsteady first year, but we stayed with it. And I'm happy to say that some stuck it out who just thought, I don't think this is going to work. And then to have the opportunity to reflect with those coaches and them say, I love this. This really was the right thing to be doing. And I'm seeing changes in teacher practices, and I love what I'm doing right now. To see that change in individuals who were willing to make a go of it, to have some individuals come back and then acknowledge and say, this really is the way it works. It works so well. All of those reasons. So you have to be willing to step out and stand up for what you think is the right thing. And so I think Brenda is, as we think about you, as you move into this other part of your life, one of the strongest things that I've always recognized about you is your willingness to do that, to stand up for what you believe is the right thing to do. And when you have someone like that, that's kind of opening the doors and pushing the doors open, putting their foot in the door, you're willing to then say, to stand behind that and say, let's do it. Let's do it because it is the right thing. And, Dawn, you were saying that we truly have always believed that it's the right thing for young children.
And I believe PBC and the model of professional learning that we're using right now is the right thing for teachers. Yes, we have a menu of professional learning sessions that everyone in public school preschool must go through. But that teacher is in the driver's seat when it comes to practice-based coaching. He or she chooses what they feel they'd like to work on, what the needs are. It is not evaluative. I was in a meeting earlier this week and heard a district administrator say something about it being evaluative. It's never evaluative. And that let me know that that person hadn't really talked to their teacher about it, because practice-based coaching is between the coach and the teacher. It is not the administrator. The administrator knows how many cycles have been done and may even know what they've chosen to work on. But as a teacher, they never see that video unless the teacher decides to share it. And very often teachers do share them because they're really good examples of change in practice. But I think that's the important thing, is recognizing PBC is a means for a teacher to take control of their professional learning and to be that professional who's able to reflect on their practices and see where they want to go and have someone who will help them to get there. And, I just strongly believe in the professionalism of our teachers, and that, when given time to reflect, when given the information, our teachers are ready to step up to the plate. They're going to do this. They're in the field because they care about young children and they want to be the best they can be. So I commend our teachers. Our surveys show over and over that our teachers appreciate being given that opportunity.
And recently, our survey that we just did for our mid-year, 466 responses, which is amazing.
You know what I think too, Katrina, what amazes me about the survey results is that 466 individuals take the time to provide those anecdotal responses. It'd be something if it was just checking the boxes, but we allow space for them to personally say, the best thing about practice-based coaching is, and they talk about that. What would I change? What I would change about practice-based coaching is when you have 466 responses and you look at those anecdotal responses, the overwhelming majority can name what is the best thing about this method of support. It's changing their practice. It's allowing them to change their own teaching practice, to look at themselves, as you all have said, and reflect on their own practice and say, this is where I want to go. And this is how I'm going to demonstrate it. And this is how I'm going to measure whether I met that goal or not, and how I'm going to integrate it into my practice. That's amazing. That's amazing to see that happening.
It really is. And I think, and I've been coaching for 4 years, I started right as we switched into this model. And I got to tell you, from the first year compared to even now, even as coaches, we're growing too, right? Like, it is really that parallel process. But I mean, these teachers, they're craving it. They're changing their behavior through practice-based coaching, and they're driving it. Like Brenda said, they're in control. They're driving that car. We're the passenger, supporting them along the way, which is amazing.
I think, yeah. And how, and I started the same time as Katrina, and just how some of those teachers that were, this new model, thinking, oh my gosh, what is this? Why are they doing this to me? And now are some of the strongest proponents of practice-based coaching, because they are seeing the changes in themselves and how it's helping the children grow. And then I think just that aspect where they get to be in charge And I just think that's very powerful. And then with them having mostly having those videos as their artifacts where they can watch themselves and actually see what they're doing, and not being told what they're doing, but seeing it for themselves is so powerful.
I met with a teacher the other day, and she, she's had a nice long career. She's coming back into education. I mean, she was just so excited knowing that here in New Mexico, because she came from another state, here in New Mexico, that we have practice-based coaching, and that she's going to get to meet with me every 2 weeks. But she's really getting to work on herself, having that time to self-reflect. I mean, she was just very amazed by that.
And I think too, the smaller rural districts where there's only one pre-K teacher, and having someone in their corner with them that they get to meet with every 2 weeks and feel supported, or even a district that maybe has 4 teachers, but still a smaller district, and just they just really need that camaraderie with someone who is coming from that pre-K perspective. Even though early childhood, goes up to age 8, it's still different. And I think maybe sometimes they feel like they're alone in that kind of that fight or that advocacy for these youngest children, and to know that they have somebody every couple of weeks that they get to meet with and be on the same page with, and know that we all I think feel like early childhood is the most important thing, the most important profession that there is, and has the biggest impact in the world. And so just to know they have somebody that they can meet with and they can collaborate with, I think is very powerful.
Well, and one thing I feel like Terri and Brenda, you've really captured, and this is before COVID, guys, is that we're doing practice-based coaching through Zoom and Torch Talent. I'm going to add this question for you guys. Tell me a little bit about how you guys came across this, and what were you trying to accomplish a little bit through that platform or those platforms?
Well, I knew our early discussions were around the high amount of travel that our consultants at that times were engaging in. Here's an example. We might have had a consultant that would travel 4 hours to be on site, 3.5 hours to be on site, could only then stay maybe an hour or 2 with the teacher, and then would have to turn around and drive home that 3.5 hours. The majority of that person's time was windshield time. Right. So we really were looking at that, and windshield time, yes, but probably the most important thing is what was it doing to them physically and emotionally. They were away from their family, at times overnight stays, very exhausting to do that one day, get up, and then maybe have to do it another day and head to the other direction of the state. Right. Although we tried to have folks close to where the districts were that they were supporting, they still were traveling quite a bit. And what was being accomplished in a model that we maybe were only on site once a month. And then we were looking globally at everything in the classroom. We weren't focusing on one thing specifically around the teacher or the teacher practice. So we really were analyzing, were we using our time most effectively? We were wearing out individuals that they just couldn't do it anymore. And it was a very costly model when you considered the travel costs, and the people costs was the most important thing. So when we looked at a model, we were looking at models, we came across practice-based coaching with the idea of not having to be on site, but still being able to have that partnership with a teacher. And looking at things, we shifted completely. We're not looking at the whole classroom anymore. We were going to just target in and hone in on a couple areas of teacher practices. And why we selected those two. They're the most impactful at times for young children. Young children need to develop the social and emotional skills so that they can be successful in their educational career. In life, period. They needed to have support around that. And for New Mexico in particular, we looked at early literacy. Our kiddos were not making the progress in early literacy that we wanted them to make. And Brenda had already been advocating about that for many years. So we now could put it all together. We could say, these are the two areas. What are the teacher practices we need to see happening in our classrooms? How can our coaches now support them with this in this way? And they could do it via distance. So our coaches aren't behind the wheel 7 hours of the day anymore. Unfortunately, now you're in front of a computer that many hours sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, just looking at the people toll, the toll that it was taking on our coaches, looking at turnover, looking at things like the wear and tear on their vehicles, the cost, and how that it excluded a segment of really highly qualified people from the positions, because those were the people who had young children or who had responsibilities with aging family members who could not be on the road all the time. And parents of teenagers, good heavens, you need to be nearby to see what's going on. You know, it just made sense, but it also made sense for teachers. I remember teachers complaining to me, why do I have this person sitting in my room for 3 hours scripting everything I'm doing? And then we have 30 minutes to talk about it. And I feel like I didn't get anything out of it. Teachers weren't driving that model. That is the expert or the consultant coming into the room and saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about that? And the poor teacher winds up feeling totally overwhelmed. Or the person comes in and sits there and looks around, and she goes back and she says, Dawn, you're just doing such a great job. You know, I enjoyed my visit today. Thank you. And Dawn says, okay, great. I'm doing a great job. I guess I don't have to grow anymore. But why is the state spending money on that?
Right.
You know, honestly, we have to be, you know, as public employees, and which we all are, we have to be responsible. Those are our tax dollars. Those are the dollars, you know, that people in New Mexico are paying in for the state budget. And we have to be responsible. And so we needed to do the best thing with the dollars that would result, you know, and coincidentally, that happens to be the best thing for teachers, which when it's the best thing for changing teacher practice, it's the best thing for young children. You know, one, as Katrina said, we don't have these kids very long. And when we're talking New Mexico pre-K, right now in public schools, New Mexico pre-K is 1 year. We've only got 1 year to get it right for this group of kids, because they're going to walk in the doors of the kindergarten. You know, I think about the pyramid model and our approach to professional learning that puts the first year teacher going through the complete pyramid model with those bridge to practice sessions, with that coaching support, because the social emotional piece, if a child has those executive function skills, those conflict resolution skills, self-awareness skills. If they believe in themselves as a learner, even if they walk in the door of a kindergarten and they don't know their letters, can't spell their name, can't count to 30, all those things. As a kindergarten teacher for many, many years, I could teach that.
Right.
However, when they come in and they don't have those social emotional skills, they're impacted for the rest of their career in school and in life. And so we feel like it's best for young children if their teacher understands the importance of social emotional learning from day one. Brand new teacher walking in the door. If you haven't gotten this in college, you're going to understand it now, because we've got to support these young children in their social emotional development in order for them to be healthy learners and just healthy people in their lives. So we do that first, and we back that up with PBC. And I think the pyramid model is a model that Terri and I looked at for a long time, back when she was at CYFD and I was, with PED. We had regular meetings with Rob Corso from the Pyramid Consortium and a cadre of folks who were training. I love that we have this standardized content now, and that we can be sure that teachers are getting, they're getting exposure and can develop competency in all parts of the pyramid model. We have a number of kindergarten teachers that have gone through pyramid training. And I had one tell me not very long ago that the turning point in her career was when I said, we've got some spots in this pyramid training. And she was struggling in many areas of her classroom, struggling in a high poverty school with children who were coming to school with a lot of concerns that were weighing those little people down and keeping them from learning. And she said that was the turning point. I knew then that I could do this and that I could equip these kids with the skills that they needed to be successful. And so I think that's been a really important part of our public school preschool program. I am constantly mentioning that we welcome Head Start, we welcome private pre-K to please come alongside us. We've got licenses. We will make it happen. We'll figure out how that they can get the full pyramid training, because I think it's ever so important. My focus has been on social emotional learning and early literacy, as Terri said. As the state has moved into the science of reading, looking at structured literacy, it is, it's in statute now that elementary teachers must have that early literacy training in the science of reading. We're giving our children the precursors of those skills. We are making sure that when they walk through the door of kindergarten, they understand the things that they need to know. They can play with language. They have those phonological awareness skills. They've got good vocabulary. Their oral language is strong. Their oral comprehension. We're doing what we can to prepare those kids for the academic side. So the academic is important. We work on early math and those kind of things. But the social emotional piece is just critical. And so for a new teacher, that's where we start.
And
I appreciate that.
Brenda, and I just wanted to highlight both Katrina and Dawn at this point in that, in recognizing how important that is and the impact of COVID over the past 2 years. It's become even more critical. In fact, just this morning having a conversation about the social emotional well-being, not only of our young ones, our students, but even our educators. And I think we're all seeing that with the COVID, but an opportunity to provide even more support and resources, primarily to our early childhood instructional coaches. We're starting a new project that is going to focus in on how to help coaches be better coaches to the teachers around the social emotional needs of young children, so that the teachers can also then meet those specific needs of the young children in their classrooms. So I know Katrina and Dawn are going to be sharing more information in the future about Seamless and how we're going to be implementing that moving forward. So just wanted to put in a plug for what's coming ahead.
Well, and I just think when I think about what you all are saying and the importance of social emotional development and helping teachers really be able to implement those best practices that we're gaining from that we're getting and using the pyramid model for. What I really see with the pyramid model and the teaching practices that are being implemented, it's helping the children to be successful and to internalize that they are successful and they can learn. And it's not just them being taught that they're a good person, but they are learning it and they're having those experiences. Yeah, I can do this. I can control my hands, and I can use my words. And so it just is really helping them to internalize those skills, which consequently helps them to know how important they are and have that self-confidence and know their worth. And I think that is such an amazing aspect of the pyramid model that maybe we don't see in other social emotional programs that are out there. So I used the pyramid model before I moved to New Mexico with children that were at risk. But I mean, I just really am happy and grateful that you guys chose the pyramid model, and that I totally believe in it. But so I think, do you want to ask Terri a quick question?
Yes, I will. Yes, and we do have more to come for Seamless, and we are excited to share it. So be looking out in the newsletter, on YouTube, be looking at Facebook. Yes, you're going to find out so many great things about Seamless and how to see all these great resources, and just really being able to connect and see the braiding coming together even more. So Terri, I'm going to ask you a question. What are 5 words to describe Brenda's legacy in early childhood?
Oh, this is such a hard question. I think over and over again, what I've heard in the last few weeks has been, I believe Brenda truly has integrity. I think that describes her number one quality around what she leaves behind in early childhood education in New Mexico. Integrity, very knowledgeable. What I shared with someone else was that Brenda has never just stood up and say, well, I believe this is the right thing because I believe it. She has always been able to back it up with the most current research, what we know is evidence-based. And so she's very knowledgeable, kind, gracious, and just dedicated. So if those are 5, I'm sure there's many more, but those are the 5 that I think of for Miss Brenda.
Thank you, Terri.
So we're coming to a close in where we'll be wrapping up, but I have one quick, I know this is not a quick question, Brenda, but in our time, it's a quick question. What words of wisdom do you have to share with us as we continue to work in this area that you've invested so much of your time and energy into to help us continue, your legacy that you and all the work that you've done.
Persevere, be strong, advocate for young children and for teachers, and advocate for public schools. There are 39 of our 89 school districts that do not have a child care center. There are small rural districts need our support because families have no other option other than the public schools. And public schools can be the center of those communities. So I think just staying the course, reassuring our districts that you're still there and that we support them and that we're listening to them and their needs. You all have been incredible advocates, but just to continue to advocate for what's best for kids. And, it's in some professions, it's about the adults. What's easy and comfortable for the adults, but we're not in that profession. The adults need to bend to what's best for kids. And very often what's best for kids is hard, but it's important. And these kids deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. So that's what I would think.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be replaying those words over and over, especially on days that we are feeling a little bit thin, worn thin. We'll listen to those words.
Yes.
You all have been such amazing supporters of kids and teachers and administrators, and often have been the interpreters for administrators, because our administrators come from the K-12 system and often the 9-12 system. And they need to know they value little kids, but they're not always sure why they value little kids other than they're cute.
Right.
To be that interpreter of this is best practice, this is what is going to support these kids as they move forward through your school system. I think that's important. And valuing families and families' input, which may look different from family to family.
Right.
But understanding that families are important and whatever we can do to help that school support their families is critical.
Thank you guys so much just for sharing today. Before we go, we just have some rapid fire questions for you. So who is the real Brenda Kofahl and the real Terri Tapia? So our first question, it's going out to Brenda, is what is your go-to lazy dinner?
Cheerios.
Ooh.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Terri, what is your go-to lazy dinner?
I hate to admit this, but it's probably chip and dips.
Oh, that's pretty good. So then, Terri, what item do you think is worth spending more money on?
Oh, you all know I'm a shopper, but you know what? I think when I shop, when I don't look at money, it would probably be when I'm buying boots.
Oh, yeah.
I love boots, and I probably have spent more on them than I should have.
Brenda, what item is worth spending more money on?
I'm with Terri with boots. I particularly like boots, and I have a whole shelf in my closet with boots that I love.
So, Brenda, would you rather go back in time or travel to the future?
I think I'd rather go back in time.
Okay.
I've always loved history. My husband and I, with two very dear friends, have visited England, Ireland, and Scotland just before the pandemic. And my maiden name was York. And so really entwined in the history of that part of the world, and would like to go back in time and see some of that.
Yeah. And then Terri, would you rather go back in time or travel in the future?
Well, here's where Brenda and I would differ, because I really would love to travel to the future. I would love to see and look forward to what lies ahead, and positive that it will be good things.
Well, thank you guys
both for coming today and meeting with us and being our first interviews.
We took this time to learn from Brenda and Terri as they shared about their experiences over the past 20 years here in New Mexico and what they've seen happen in early childhood. But I'm even more excited to know not only are we in the same field as them, but we are also in the book club with them.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. Look at all these great connections that we find out as we are sitting around just talking.